Antonio Pappano. All my life I've been surrounded by wonderful singing. And as a conductor, it's been my great good fortune to work with some of the best singers there are. I'm on the stage of the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, my musical home, and home to all the great operatic stars, past and present. In this program, I'll be sharing with you the wonders of the mezzo-soprano voice, a slightly lower incarnation of the soprano. Some of the great female singers of the modern age were mezzo-sopranos. What secrets did they learn from the mezzos they admired? What makes mezzos tick?
Having flat vowels was probably a great help. I sang Yorkshire, in a sense.
Wow, that was pretty scary. I'll be talking to some of the great singers of today, working with them, in fact, to find out some of the tricks of the trade. How do they do it? How does the throat work? How does the breathing work? The body, the soul. A randy page, a witch, a commander, a suicidal queen, Delilah, Romeo, Cinderella, a haggard gypsy mother, and a fiery gypsy girl. What do these roles have in common? They're all sung by mezzo-sopranos. In opera speak, witches, bitches, and britches. The mezzo-soprano voice is known for its earthy quality, sensuality, dare I say, its erotic quality. Ever playing the rival, the siren, the enchantress. The mezzo-soprano is the closest in sound to a woman's natural speaking voice.
I think a good way to describe mezzo is the vibration at the center of the earth, that the edges of the voice become one with the landscape.
The mezzo range may surprise you. From the very lowest notes a woman can sing, she also has to sing top notes nearly as high as those of the soprano.
You're expected to be able to compete with the sopranos on their high notes. We're just not going to stay there all night long.
They may share many of the same notes, but the characters mezzos and sopranos play can be worlds apart. The most definitive mezzo roles aren't idealized heroines, but recognizably real flesh and blood women. One most of all. Carmen is a radical departure. Gone are the prim and proper characters that are the domain of the sopranos. Here we have a challenging, ballsy, capricious, fearless mezzo lead who challenges all the prevailing ideas of how a woman is supposed to act. And she surprises us at every turn, all the while singing immortal tunes. There have been thousands of Carmens, so you must put your individual stamp on it. Otherwise, the tunes are just the tunes. You could say that Carmen is to opera what Hamlet is to theater. The forbidding shadow of previous performances hangs over each new interpreter. Here's Anna Caterina Antonacci, the Italian mezzo, in a smoldering performance at Covent Garden that I conducted in 2007. Another Italian mezzo, Giulietta Simeonato, a coquettish Carmen, in Tokyo in 1959, singing in Italian. Wow, what a high note that was. The vivacious American Grace Bumbry in a 1966 film directed by the conductor Herbert von Karajan. there's far more to Carmen than her surface glamour.
I was not the type for Carmen because I had 2 flops in Frankfurt and in Darmstadt, 2 flops with Carmen. So I had to make something out of Carmen, what is away from comb and red roses and so on. This I couldn't do. And I thought, she is a free woman. She does what she wants to do. She has a lover, and if she doesn't love him anymore, she has another lover. She is a free woman. She is not dependent on anything in the world. And so I could do it.
Here's Christa Ludwig's German Carmen from 1961.
hat bunte Flügel, so scheinen Vogel, senkt man schwer. Haltet fest sie mit Band und Zügel, wenn sie nicht will, kommt sie nicht her. Ob ihr bietet, ob ihr
The mezzo may get fewer leading parts, but the supporting roles she does get to play are cut out of the same cloth as Carmen. Gutsy, delinquent, edgy, and some really scary. A much-admired mezzo, celebrated for her dramatic power as well as her definitively dark-tinged voice, was Giulietta Simeonato. Here she is as Azucena, about to reveal that, to avenge the murder of her mother, she has accidentally thrown her own baby into a fire rather than the intended victim. Giulietta Simeonato's own mother took a leaf from Azucena's book. She threatened to kill her daughter with her own hands rather than bear the shame of seeing her become an opera star. It was only after her mother's death that she truly began her career. But she spent years playing minor roles until recognition finally arrived.
Un giorno un annunciatore, presentando il mio libro, per esempio, ha detto, dice, ci sono voluti 20 anni, dice, perché Giulietta Simeonato venisse rivelata e che avessero capito cosa era Giulietta Simeonato. Dice, evidentemente gli addetti ai lavori, mi segua bene, gli addetti, è quello che ha detto lui, gli addetti ai lavori non sapevano che in banchina c'era un Maradona.
Giulietta Simeonato scares me to death, I have to tell you. The force of her personality and her voice are quite blood-curdling. Look at her eyes. She doesn't blink, this woman. Constant stream of tone, quite unvaried in color, but imposing. You ask yourself, will she ever get to the top? Well, she can. See, she doesn't blink. Simeonato was also known for the sheer power she could bring to the very lowest part of her vocal range. This is the mysterious mechanism that singers call the chest voice.
Chest voice, yes, is going to be something where you purposefully gather your forces, and it's going to be literally sort of this resonance, the chest bone, versus this is where you spend most of the time. You let the sound come up into what the Italians call the mask, all this skeletal structure here. You bypass that for the head voice. Woo! So we're really quiet in the mask here. And if I'm gonna go to the chest, I let it settle here. I relax sort of everything, and no. It's gonna be more the chest voice.
Here's Simeonato in spectacular chest voice mode. Roles like Azucena, the witches and bitches are an important staple of the mezzo repertoire. Bel canto takes second place here. The English mezzo-soprano Dame Felicity Palmer came to specialize in playing such grim ladies on stage, such as the famous witch featured by the brothers Grimm. Felicity Palmer is known for her acting talents, not just in comedy, but in full-on tragedy too. Greek tragedy as realized by Richard Strauss. The mezzo role in his 1909 opera Electra is a fearsome lady who took an axe to her husband, Agamemnon, while he was taking a bath. Her name, Clytemnestra. Of course, she had her reasons.
She has some axe to grind. I mean, I can use that.
Yeah, we don't use that term with this opera.
Bringing out the horror of such characters places huge demands on a mezzo's vocal health.
The role of Clytemnestra, one of a series of very, very troubling ladies that you tend to perform.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes, absolutely.
Beauty of tone is not the first thing that one would think of.
No.
Because you're so locked into the words, and if you're dealing with people who psychologically are somehow flawed, it does affect the sound, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I've had to look at steaming into a sort of biting tone, which makes it very ugly, to find a way of getting that anger or giving orders or whatever it is across without affecting the voice. And these kind of roles can really be quite dangerous.
Und dennoch, es ist so fürchterlich, dass meine Seele sich wünscht, erwähnt zu sein, und jedes Glied in mir schreit nach dem Tod, und dabei leb ich und bin nicht einmal krank. Du siehst mich doch, seh ich wie eine Kranke. Kann man denn vergehen leben?
How do you find the redeeming characteristics in what on the surface are very evil characters?
What fascinates me more and more is how people tick. I'm quite interested, and so the baddies, I want to understand why they behave as they do, and so I think I've failed if they say, "Oh, you're just so evil." I think one really needs to try and inhabit the person that one is playing, get into their skin if possible.
The very lowest female singing voice is the contralto, a subcategory of the mezzo-soprano voice. Perhaps one woman in 1,000 possesses it. In the 1940s, a singer from Lancashire became one of the best loved of British performers.
Her name was Kathleen Ferrier, and she was one of that rare breed, the contralto, a true contralto. Not only did she have those low tones, those luscious, sensual tones that we know to be the color of the contralto, but there was, I think, a unique poignancy. Whatever she sang, whatever note, whatever dynamic, it just got through to you. It would bring tears to your eyes.
It's no accident that Kathleen Ferrier became the nation's favorite during the Second World War and the austerity years. Vivacious and charismatic, she was also down to earth.
After the war, she did a series of tours and concerts all around Britain. And I think that the fact that she was so often requested on programmes like Housewife's Choice, Family Favourites, showed that she could appeal not just to the highbrow Albert Hall audience, but also to, normal householders who just wanted to hear her sing. Because her repertoire was enormous. I mean, it went from Mahler's Song of the Earth to Blow the Wind Southerly or Kitty Me Love Will You Marry Me and things like that. Folk songs.
Before turning professional, R. Cath spent 9 years as a switchboard operator for the GPO in Blackburn. She auditioned to be the voice of the speaking clock and was turned down. No footage of her singing exists, but the many recordings of her rich, sonorous voice are evergreen. Kathleen Ferrier first came to prominence with Messiah, sung at Westminster Abbey in 1943. The tenor was Peter Pears.
At first, I think one was simply taken by this adorable personality. She had no troubles, I think, in standing up and giving us herself.
In the audience was Benjamin Britten.
Something that touched me the first time I heard her in Westminster Abbey, and that is the only thing which moves me about singers, and that is that the voice is a vocal expression of their personality. I loathe what is normally called a beautiful voice, because to me it's like an overripe peach which says nothing. And Kathleen never had that. Even if she made mistakes, even if one could criticize her, her voice was always Kathleen, and the weaknesses in the voice were the weaknesses in Kathleen, and the glories in the voice, which were, as no need to say, were many, were the glories of Kathleen.
I heard Kathleen Ferrier when I was a schoolboy, and I can hear Kathleen Ferrier doing Messiah now to this day. It was sensational. We hadn't heard anything like that.
She was just world-beating. What a tragedy that she would die at the age of 41 in 1953. This was really a major loss because she was really one of the outstanding British singers, and even today her influence is felt. All the young mezzo-sopranos that sing, Kathleen Ferrier will always be a beacon.
It was written at the time that her death cancelled out the euphoria of the coronation. It was said that she was the second most loved woman in Britain after the Queen.
Ravishing. She was particularly admired for her interpretation of English repertoire. It's been one of the specializations of fellow mezzo Sarah Connolly.
Perhaps the greatest joy of listening to mezzo-soprano is luxuriating in that lower middle register, wouldn't you say?
Yes, and I'd also say that it's easier to get the text across in the lower part of the voice because you're not putting so much pressure on the instrument, which is why the likes of Kathleen Ferrier were so clever at interpreting the text and so touchingly and so beautifully.
Now, you sing in certainly every operatic language, of course, but you sing a lot in English.
Yes, I've chosen to do that, I think.
And why is that?
Partly because I have a sentimental attachment to the composers, Elgar and Britten and Tippett. It's a wonderful legacy for a British singer.
It's only very rarely in the history of music that a singer's impact and reputation transcends that of pure music. But that is undoubtedly the case with Marian Anderson. True, she had an exceptional voice. No less a judge than Toscanini said to her, "A voice like yours comes round only once in 100 years." But what secured her reputation in America and beyond was her courage and dignity as a human being.
He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the big round world in his hands. He's got the wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
Marian Anderson, like Kathleen Ferrier, was a contralto.
And the stars in his hands. He's got the wind and rain in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
Her bearing was regal. There was a no-nonsense, no-frills approach to her stage persona. It was just the voice. The voice was gorgeous, but it was an honest type of singing. There was no flailing about with her arms. There was no eye-rolling. It was just plain and simple and deep.
Bowed his head on down, and he never said a mumbling word. He bowed his head and died, and he never said a mumbling word.
That's not a voice, that's a cello. Marian Anderson did have ambitions to sing opera, but she would have to wait a long time before she set foot on an American operatic stage. This had nothing to do with the quality of her voice. It had everything to do with the color of her skin. Marian Anderson was born in 1897 in Philadelphia, the granddaughter of a slave. Her early career was beset by prejudice, but slowly the tide turned in her favor. In 1939, President Roosevelt himself engineered a concert for 75,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington. Singing surprisingly high there. It was not until 16 years after this concert that Marian Anderson finally got to sing an opera.
When she was in her late 50s and sadly past her vocal prime, Marian Anderson made history. She became the first African-American singer to sing at New York's Metropolitan Opera. The role was Ulrica, the Negro fortune teller from Verdi's Ballo in Maschera. Now, it didn't matter that her voice was not in its prime. Her mere presence on that stage was an inspiration for a whole new generation of African-American singers.
I was fortunate enough to be in the audience, and she stood there, Anderson, and she sang with strength that was even more, with dignity that was even more, with excitement that was even more, personally for me that night. And I knew I'm leaving from this audience, and I'm going down there, and I know it is very much because of her, and I am going to be standing where she was singing tonight. And it worked out pretty good.
Marian Anderson is a shining example of a great artist and a courageous human being. Two of the most celebrated American mezzo-sopranos of their generation cited Marian Anderson as an inspiration, Grace Bumbry and Shirley Verrett.
Shirley Verrett's voice is one in a million. Warm, velvety, everything that you would expect of the typical mezzo-soprano. But she had fantastic high notes. And we mustn't forget that in the dramatic mezzo repertoire, high notes are a must.
The sheer physicality of her singing. Shirley Verrett was born in the Deep South, and as with Simeonato, her choice of career was opposed by her parents, devout Christians. When she sang Carmen, they fell to their knees to beg God's forgiveness. Like Marian Anderson, she faced racial prejudice, but with the civil rights movement growing in strength, she faced it on her own terms.
There were places in the United States when I began, and there are still places in the United States that I have not been to sing. And in all honesty, I don't wish to sing there, because I have the feeling that if someone does not want me to sing in a place, I don't want to go. You sing, but you don't sing to segregated audiences. Who pays for a ticket comes in and sits where that ticket says he can sit, and not because he's black, green, or gray, or whatever.
Shirley Verrett's natural acting ability and her stunning good looks made her an ideal interpreter of a particular type of mezzo-soprano role. Around the 1850s, composers realized that that husky, earthy, dark quality voice would be ideal for the siren, enchantress, the femme fatale. One of Shirley's signature roles is the role of Delilah in Saint-Saëns' Samson and Delilah.
See how she smolders. It's genuinely sexy, and she uses her voice, that husky, dark quality in the low register, to really seduce Samson and to seduce us, the listeners. Rewind a century before Delilah and Carmen, and the mezzo-soprano mostly had to feed on scraps, playing nurses, drones, drudges, and also-rans. Now, the castrati had sung the leading male roles at the time, and when they began to be ushered from the stage, many of their high-voiced male roles were handed to the mezzo instead. Here was manna from heaven.
During the 18th and 19th centuries, the mezzo-soprano benefited greatly from the decline of the castrato tradition. Now they were being called upon to play the young male heroes. This combination of a clear soprano-like timbre with a dark quality was perfect for the young teenage adolescent. Now these trouser roles, as they're called, took in both sides of the theatrical tradition, the tragic and the comic, with the inevitable sexual frisson caused by a female playing a male making love to a female character. Yeah, that's it.
One of the first and most famous of all is Mozart's Cherubino, the sex-obsessed page from The Marriage of Figaro. Here he is sung in a celebrated interpretation by the American mezzo Frederica von Stade. She's singing a song that is about asking the ladies to give their opinion as to whether he's in love or not. And he describes all the feeling of love: hot, cold, suffering, joy. He secretly lusts after the Countess. Well, not so secretly, actually. Countess is obviously interested. Trills and thrills of the hormonal teenager.
Trouser rolls have been one of the best gifts, certainly to my career. You have to get way outside your comfort zone. You have to really inhabit something very foreign. Men are very angular, and women are much curvier. So if I'm thinking angles, I'm thinking lower part of the body, which is where the man lives, quicker, sharper, and oftentimes it's in the music that way. Then the physicality starts to emerge as male.
Sarah Connolly made her name playing trouser roles like Julius Caesar.
As a performer, dressing up as a man, finding the way to walk like a man, that must take some doing, right? I mean, tell me about that process.
It's a question of lowering the centre of gravity. Women tend to walk and control their walk from their upper bodies, from their waists, and when men can walk from their hips. I mean, we're not talking John Wayne swagger or anything, but men do tend to control their movement from their hips more. Their legs are looser. They don't, it's not up here, it's down there. And that little clue made a huge difference to my understanding of how women can impersonate men without trying.
By the turn of the 20th century, the sexual frisson of a woman playing a man, making love to a woman, was hard to miss. But not all mezzos enjoyed unsexing themselves to play the breeches roles.
I hated to sing trouser roles. I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink, I have to be slim, and my female attributions had to be away, you know, and we had such a terrible thing around the body. Oh, it was ugly. Oh, I hated the Busenquetsche. And it is like a corset. It does everything away. And I couldn't breathe anymore because, I don't know, I don't like it.
Help was at hand. Rossini had a particular affinity for the mezzo-soprano. He was married to one and wrote one of the best starring roles in the whole mezzo canon.
The operas of Gioacchino Rossini are a goldmine for the mezzo-soprano voice. Both the tragic operas and the sparkling comic ones are alive and well today. He demanded a singer that could surprise us with flights of fancy, coloratura, fast-moving notes, all of a sudden, that would make us fly with the singer. Frisson, our hearts aflutter. But these roulades, these adornments to the musical line needed a tremendous amount of vocal flexibility, taste, and musicality.
The sparkling coloratura mezzo roles, with their bravura pyrotechnics, reached a zenith with Angelina, the lead in La Cenerentola, or Cinderella. A celebrated modern Angelina is the superstar mezzo Cecilia Bartoli. Born in Rome, the daughter of professional singers, she made her own debut aged 8. Her dazzling performances of the repertoire of the 17th, 18th, and early 19th centuries have made her one of the most admired and influential mezzo-sopranos of the last 30 years.
Her absolute command of that music. She wasn't just getting through it. She wasn't just singing it. She was creating it without fear, without limit. It was as if she just tore up the rule book.
La Cenerentola ends with a champagne aria, Non più mesta. Here, Cinderella and the mezzo-soprano celebrate their transformation from drudge to princess.
Non più mesta un sogno in gioco, un sogno in un sogno in
I say she tore up the rules. I don't think she ever read the rules. And as a result, it's this wonderful reminder that that's what the world wants. We want uniqueness. We want to hear that voice. We want to hear, what do you have to say? What do you sound like?
Cinderella, Carmen, Delilah, starring roles for the mezzo are unfortunately few and far between. One option is to taste the forbidden fruits of the soprano repertoire, but it's not without controversy and can lead to ruin. And yet, it can certainly work with the right role. The great German mezzo-soprano Christa Ludwig on occasion sang the soprano part in Beethoven's Fidelio. Leonora impersonates a jailer to rescue her husband, a political prisoner.
I never woke up in the morning as a soprano. Not always. Sometimes I was like a rave. And never like this. And I thought, oh my God, I have to sing this evening, Fidelio. What am I doing? So what am I doing? So slowly, also with cortisone, of course, because all the singers, they took a certain time much cortisone. It was a certain time in the 60s. The doctors, they gave everything, yeah? It's all over. Yeah. Not only in Vienna, in Berlin, in Buenos Aires, in New York, they gave everything. Only that we could sing in the evening good. So at 12, 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was in good voice, and then I knew, oh, I can sing Fidelio. My mother was a singer, and when I was a child and I heard her singing Fidelio, I was 8 years old, and I said, I want to sing Fidelio in my life once, and then I can die. And I made it, but I didn't die, so.
Tinge of darkness in the middle voice just gives it away that she's a mezzo-soprano and not a soprano. The role of Leonora is particularly challenging, even for sopranos. It's very high, it concentrates in the middle voice, demands a singer who can project in that all-important middle voice.
But it is difficult. Believe me, it is difficult. Yeah, and also for the sopranos, the very last high note, it is difficult, yeah.
She does it absolutely brilliantly.
But the next day I was...
An alternative, less controversial option for mezzos bored with singing the same handful of roles in the standard repertoire is to mine the music of the more distant past. It's a movement that has been gathering pace since the 1950s. The revival of early music has proved to be a real boon for the lighter mezzo-soprano voices. All but forgotten roles from the past, many of them originally sung by the castrati, have been dusted down and brought into the limelight, vastly expanding the mezzo-soprano repertoire. One groundbreaking production that emerged from this trend was the 1996 Glyndebourne staging of Handel's Theodora, directed by Peter Sellers. Its star was the great American mezzo-soprano Lorraine Hunt Lieberson. Lorraine began her career as a viola player, becoming a professional singer at the age of 30. It wasn't so much that Peter Sellers cast her, it was the other way around.
Lorraine had sung it in Boston in concert, and so they made a tape and sent it to me. And so, I proposed to Glyndebourne Theodora because I had just heard this tape of Lorraine.
Theodora is an oratorio not meant to be staged, but oh, how it works. Lorraine Hunt Lieberson is able to wring out the drama inherent in Handel's story of a Christian martyr. Lorraine was a mezzo-soprano with incredible gifts as an actress. She was a supreme musician. The way she ornaments, the way she captures the true Handelian spirit is, I think, remarkable.
As with rosy steps the morn advancing drives the shades of night, so from virtuous toils well born raise the hopes of endless light. Raise the hopes of endless light. As with rosy steps the morn advancing drives the shades of night, so from virtuous toils well born raise the hopes of light. Raise the hopes of endless light. So from virtuous toils well born, raise the hopes of endless light. Raise the hopes of light. Raise the hopes of endless light.
These astonishing levels of sound that float in a middle place that is the mezzo sound, that is centered in the heart. And that's Lorraine's beauty.
Lorraine Hunt Lieberson died 10 years after this performance at the terribly young age of 52. Superb technique, innate musicality, consummate musicianship, dramatic flair, distinctive personality. Rarely do these things come together as equal partners to such a degree as they did with Dame Janet Baker.
You white clouds of heaven, oh stay for a moment, and make your way to France, away from this torment.
Dame Janet is possibly the greatest singer this country has ever produced, and she had it all, and she could do it all, from early opera to trouser rolls, to lieder, to oratorio, to symphonic singing. The great heroines of the French repertoire, Handel, Purcell, Bach, Mahler, you name it, she did it, and she wanted it all. What does performing bring to you?
It contains everything. It's a visual, audio experience in a way that nothing else is. That's why it's so difficult to get right. You have all these factors coming together, one hopes, and any one of them can go wrong, and often do. But there's so much happening, and I think that's why the audience find it so exciting. Everything exciting is being given to them on a plate. You don't see them because you're all in the dark, so to speak. But you know there's this immense world out there that somehow you've got to reach. And it's a question of what's happening up here, the intention of thinking about the people up in the gods, that they've got to hear it too. It's as though you expand to the space mentally.
I've never known anybody work as hard as Janet to get it right. It had to be absolutely perfect. The languages, the pronunciation, the knowledge of the role. She would read, I mean, Mary Stuart, we did Mary Stuart, and it took months of reading about Queen Elizabeth and whatever. That's how Janet was. She was a perfectionist. It had to be right. It had to be, she had to be the character. I love the story about Janet in New York. She and Keith, her husband, were walking, and somebody came up and said, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? And Janet said, with a great deal of work, my dear, with a great deal of work.
You're famous for having the clearest diction possible. Talk to us about your technique. How do you develop that as a singer?
When you practice at home, practice the libretto with the melody, the only sound you can make is on a vowel. So somehow you have to use tricks of the trade to make the vowels, the openness, as long as possible before you fall off the edge of the cliff, so to speak. You need the consonants, of course, but we can never be like a violinist who can go on and on and on and on. We have at some point A to breathe and B to sing a consonant, which snaps the sound off. So the trick is to elongate that vowel sound. And when I encourage people to do that, they feel ridiculous because they close off the sound naturally much quicker. But there's a discipline in seeing how long the note is and not letting go of that vowel sound until you absolutely must. My job was to serve the composer and the poet. And I really mean that, try to remove myself, as some actors say they do. They remove themselves to the side of the stage and watch themselves playing the role.
So in other words, you're like a vessel.
Like a vessel, yes. Singers are emotional creatures. That's what we are. We are human beings of emotional sensitivity.
Would you say that the emotions that you lived in your career were sometimes overwhelming? How could you not end up in a puddle of tears?
But I mean, people don't pay money for people crying all over the set, do they? You
No.
can't do that. You can't do that. Somehow or other there is this not a distance, but it goes into another place. I find it difficult to describe because I'm a mechanic. I'm a working mechanic. Everything has to work. And if that happens, if I've, in my own opinion, done enough work, and the thing is rehearsed well, and the thing is going well, you're happy with everybody and everything, there is this moment when you do stand aside, and something, I will use the word spiritual, puts the final touch on things. And then if the fates are with you, the magic can descend, which has absolutely nothing at all to do with you. You make the possibility. And that's what singing is. It's making a possibility for something magic to happen, over which we've no control.
I can point to technical things, the manipulation of the vibrato, the legato, but the genuine pathos and feeling is, well, it's heart-stopping, isn't it? Next time, we move from the lowest female voices to the lowest male voices. Gods, demons, tsars, tyrants, drunkards, heartless seducers. The mighty bass and dark-edged baritone take the stage.
Divente cari